Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This is for discussion board number 5 for week 5 at Moody Bible College. So the question was posted. A friend says to you, the New Testament should be read literally, not figuratively, because the New Testament is literal, and I believe that everything in the New Testament should be applied to me directly. Anyone who takes exception to that does not believe the Bible. And then it says, in thinking about your readings about the epistles, how would you respond to this? What would you agree or disagree with in your friend's statement? And then there's a secondary question down there as an example. So my thoughts on this would be, if someone were to pose a question or make a statement like that, my first thing, the first thing I would probably do is kind of pause and think about what they're saying, and then kind of give them a scripture or two to reference. Maybe they shouldn't take everything literally. And of course, most things in the Bible are literal, and then there's some things that are figurative or allegorical. Um, but so like I said before, you answer, it'd be wise to just pause and think about it. But so the skeptic usually wants you to have a yes or no answer, so that they can give you a gotcha. If you say yes, I got you on this, or no, I got you on this. So, but some of the questions like that are kind of absurd and dangerous. But if you take Mark 9, I think it's chapter 9, verse 42 through 48. It says something like, it tells believers to cut their foot or their hands, or if their foot or hand offends them, then cut it off, or if their eye offends them, they should pluck it out. And so you would be agreeing to self mutilation. And I don't think that interpretation that doesn't make any sense. I think there's a story behind the reason for that, for saying that. And so, but sometimes people make statements that are meant to be taken literally, and sometimes they're meant to be taken figuratively. Like if I say the bear and Uncle Sam are going to get into a fight, and they're going to use nuclear weapons. Well, that doesn't mean a literal bear and a literal man named Uncle Sam is going to fight each other with nuclear weapons. It just means that I'm talking about the United States and Russia. And then you have another example where someone says, I'm going to do 95 miles an hour down the road in my sports car. Well, you would have to take that literally, because you can literally do 95 miles an hour down the road in a sports car. But if they told me that they were flying down the road, I'd say no. That's cars don't fly. At least not to this point in the technological advances of the world. But so that's kind of my answer. I would say yes and no to it, and I would tell them, I'd give these examples and say, well, that's you kind of have to look at it both ways. You can't just take it all literal. Um, like I said, most things are literal, and then some things are figurative or allegorical. So, and it says, for example, did Paul have more liberty than we do when interpreting the Old Testament? And if so, why? If no, why not? Did Paul have more liberty interpreting the Old Testament? The answer to that question is probably Paul studied under Gamaliel, which is a well-known um, biblical scholar back in that day. And so, in order to even study under that guy, you had to know the Old Testament pretty much by heart, the Tanakh, at least, and probably the writers and the prophets too, I think. But you had to know the Torah for sure, the first 5 books, very well. And a lot of things in the New Testament refer to things in the Old Testament. There's a mountain of, like I was looking at something the other day, and it's not referenced in King James or any other of the Bibles that I have, but I have the Tree of Life Bible, and there's something in there that was referenced in Daniel, that was talked about in the New Testament. I thought it was interesting. It gave me a new perspective on what the Scripture meant. So, but does Paul have more liberty? I think Paul had enough knowledge to have liberty. Now, there's probably some connections he didn't make. And I heard one today too that was a perfect example, and I can't think of it right now. It was about Jesus and the donkey, um, the suffering servant riding in on a donkey, and then the Messiah coming in the clouds of great power and great glory. And so the Jewish people back then looked at it like, well, if you're a bad person, then the Messiah's gonna come and ride in on a donkey to destroy you. If you're good, he's gonna come with, or if you believe, then he's gonna come in the clouds. Well, he did the donkey already, and he's gonna do the coming in the clouds. So I think that your perspective changes, and I think Paul had to learn some of that. The way things were interpreted, because there's a lot of midrash, oral tradition stuff interpreted uh, in the New Testament. It'll say something like, um, they sit in Moses' seat, but do as they tell you to do, but not do as they do. Well, the Hebrew translation is do as he says, not as they do, meaning Moses. And so, it'll use law, but it means legalism, because the Pharisees were known to take and put their own laws above God's laws, with the oral traditions and sage writings and things like that. So you have to take that in consideration when thinking about Paul. Paul knew the difference. He even said somewhere where he was zealous for his fathers and or zealous after his fathers and all them for the work they did, but he had to change, and he had to kind of re-understand most of the Old Testament, and I think that's why he went to, I think it'd be modern day Saudi Arabia, to study, for about 3 years, to kind of understand things about Jesus. And so that's pretty much my answer with that question. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope I answered everything right. But we'll see you next week.